Good day, everyone. My name is Courtney, and I'm coming to you from my home kitchen. Today I'm going to talk to you about taverns in the 18th century Western Pennsylvania frontier, and then I will conclude by doing a quick demonstration for you where we learn how to make a boozy period dessert called Syllabub. But first, let's talk about taverns. So there are a few misconceptions out there about taverns. So I feel like the best way to approach that is to talk about what taverns were and what they were not. Taverns were the hub of the community in the Western Pennsylvania frontier. They were not just a place where you could go and throw back a drink and let loose. The tavern was often the first building to actually be constructed in a community. Taverns were obviously a place where you could go and get food and drink, but they were so much more than that. If you wanted to get a bit of news, you could go to the tavern and have access to a copy of your local newspaper, or you could get the scuttlebutt from your friends or neighbors that you may run into at the establishment. If you needed to send or receive mail, you could do that at the taverns. Voting occurred in taverns. If a militia needed to be mustered for whatever reason, that would often occur in taverns as well. If you needed to book passage, if you needed overnight accommodations, all of these things happened at taverns. They were also social gathering places, so you could see they really were an important part of life on the Western Pennsylvania frontier. As I said, they were oftentimes the first building to be constructed, even before churches. So until such a time that a church could be constructed, they would actually hold church services in the tavern building. Now in terms of what you could expect to be offered in a tavern. In terms of the food and drink, typical tavern fare would include a selection of roasted meats and vegetables, perhaps a soup or a stew, and a variety of very basic breads and cheeses. In terms of beverages, for your imbibing pleasure, you could typically expect to be offered an ale or a small beer being one with a low alcohol content. There would be cider, a variety of wines or brandies, and then also mixed libations that use rum or whiskey. But in this area at this time, you're going to see more people consuming whiskey as opposed to rum. Now, this is usually a point where I am asked about the mixed drink. Yes, there were mixed drinks in the 18th century. It was a good way of using up what you had on hand, not letting anything go to waste, and they usually consisted of a mixture of different alcohols that included also some fruit juice, or fruit rind. A good example of that would be a punch. And taverns were typically known for their signature punches. Their recipe will kind of be their calling card, and the better your punch, the more frequented your establishment would be. So punches were a very important thing to the tavern owner in serving a really, really good punch. Another thing about mixed drinks in 18th century taverns is that they were often being served because it was simply good for business. If a tavern owner is serving really, really strong drinks, the patrons are only going to have one or two, and then they're going to be good. If you serve something that's a little bit weaker, that's really sweet and fruity and palatable, then your customers are going to keep coming back for more and more and more. So of course, taverns are in the business of making a profit, so the more drinks you sell, the more money in your pocket. And you'll notice that I am a woman and I'm standing here at our tavern setup giving this presentation. And you may be wondering about women and taverns, so this is also another question that I get quite frequently. So this would be a good time to kind of debunk some of these myths about women and taverns. The first one has to do with women actually patronizing taverns. Yes, women were visiting taverns. they were not barred from entering them. As I said, they were social places. They were public places, so there's no reason or evidence to suggest that they were not going to taverns. Now, they probably were frequenting them a little less often than the men, but we do have documented evidence of women staying overnight in taverns and also having meals there with friends and family. So that is one myth that we are going to debunk. The other one has to do with women being tavern owners. Yes, it was very possible for a woman to own her own establishment. Oftentimes she would be a single or widowed woman, but that didn't always necessarily have to be the case. So it was, very likely that you could enter a tavern and have the proprietor in fact be a woman. Now, as I promised, we are going to move on to our demonstration on how to make our dessert. And so this dessert is actually called Syllabub. And we've got the word printed here for you because it is an odd sounding word that you may not be familiar with. So what is Syllabub? It is actually considered to be one of the oldest English desserts of record. It's almost a cross between a dessert and a beverage. It involves some alcohol, some cream that's sweetened and flavored with a little bit of lemon. And yes, it is as good as it sounds. Syllabub, again, an Old English dessert. It was very popular between the 16th and 19th centuries. And its presence here in America is known basically back to the very, very, very early colonial period here. The word itself, Syllabub, like I said, is a very unique sounding word. Actually derives from the Old English Syllabub, and it's sometimes pronounced and spelled that way. Silly meaning happy, and as I can personally attest, you cannot help but be happy when you are partaking of Syllabub. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into our recipe, or our receipt as it was called in the 18th century. So first off, your ingredients. What you will need is a cup and a half of heavy cream. You will also need half of a cup of sugar. I'm using organic raw cane sugar here. You will need half a cup of Rhenish, and you may be wondering what Rhenish is. It is a wine that is made from the Rhine River region of Europe. Today, the closest comparable wine would probably be a Riesling, but you can use any semi-sweet white wine that you like. We'll also need some dry sherry, or sack as it was known in the 18th century, and also the juice and rind of either one large lemon that I have here, or 2 smaller lemons. So you're going to begin by whipping your heavy cream. So in the interest of time, I've gotten a little bit of a head start on this, and using my birch twig whisk, which was the common tool in the 18th century, you are going to whip up your cream until it slightly thickens just a bit. So once you've reached that stage, you're going to add your remaining ingredients one at a time, incorporating them as you add each. So we're going to start with our sugar. So we'll sprinkle that into our cream. And we'll get that nice and incorporated. Adding the sugar first actually kind of helps to stabilize your cream. And then once you've got your sugar nice and incorporated, you want to add your wine next. So the combination of your acidic ingredients with your creamy ingredients is kind of what achieves the finished product. It curdles it ever so slightly, which helps you achieve the right consistency in your finished product. So next we're going to add our sherry, just a little bit. This kind of adds a nice subtle flavor that pairs well with the lemon and the flavor of the wine. Okay, now that we've got that mixed in, we're going to take our lemon. We're going to squeeze the juice in. Like I said, I'm using one large lemon here. But if you have some that are a little bit on the smaller side, two would probably work well. And then I'm going to go ahead and add the zest in as well, which just really kind of adds more intensity of lemon flavor to our dessert. Okay, so now that all of our ingredients are added and incorporated, we begin the whisking, the more labor-intensive portion of our receipt. So, as I said, I'm using a birch twig whisk, which would have been customary of the time. However, I'm fully aware that in the year 2020, we have available to us electrical gadgets such as stand mixers and hand mixers with whisk attachments. So, if you are so inclined to use one of those, I strongly encourage it. You do not have to be a hero here, but either way, either method you choose, you're going to want to whisk this for 3 to 5 minutes, and it's going to thicken back up. You'll notice that it thins ever so slightly with the addition of the liquids. So what you're doing here is just kind of getting it back up to that thicker, creamy consistency that's just basically kind of slightly whipped. You don't want like full stiff peaks as in a whipped cream that you would kind of top your desserts with. You'll see it kind of tends to want to go all over the kitchen. And trust me, whether you're using the birch twig whisk or the electric mixer, it's probably going to happen either way. So just kind of be prepared to do a little bit of cleaning once you're done. So again, you're just going to want to whisk until it's probably sort of soft peak consistency. You want to kind of be able to have it a pillowy texture that's easily spooned into a glass. So now would also be a good chance to talk to you about one of our ingredients, because this is also a question that I get quite often, and that's having to do with the lemon. So a lot of people are curious as to if or how one could get citrus fruits such as lemons in the 18th century Western Pennsylvania frontier. Well, the answer is yes, it was possible, though not easy. But when you think about it, in this area we are close to several major navigable rivers. So any items from the southern part of the country or the Caribbean could be moved north by either going up the coast or the Mississippi River. And from there, they could be loaded onto wagons and then transported to this area. So the logistics are definitely in place for it. However, just like anything else, you have to have the funds in order to be able to make that happen. But yes, it was definitely possible. And also, if you think about it, that is going to be quite the long, arduous journey from the South or the Caribbean to Western Pennsylvania. So fruits like citrus, lemons, limes, oranges, especially pineapples, when you think about it, have a very thick outer skin or rind, so that really protects them and lends them to making that arduous journey at the time. Okay, so we are just about there. It could probably stand to have just a few more minutes of whisking. However, I want to be able to hurry along and let you see how we finish this. But before we do that, I am going to pause for just 1 second, because at this stage you do have a choice to make. You could take this delightful mixture and eat it straight out of the bowl with a spoon. No judgment here, because I'm not going to lie, I have been known to do that and actually lick the bowl at the end as well. It is very, very delicious, surprisingly so. You may not have ever thought to combine these ingredients before. That's why I'm sharing this recipe with you, because it is so very good. But if you choose to actually finish the last couple of steps and see the recipe through to its completion, you can take a tall, slender glass such as this one. This is called a shrub glass. And you may be wondering what shrub is. Well, shrub refers to one of two things. It's a word that's kind of used interchangeably for a couple of different items. The first is a sweet fruit liqueur that can be made with rum or whiskey, made with, again, the juice or the rind of different fruits, or it can also refer to a sweet fruit vinegar, almost like a fruit vinegar syrup, that could also be mixed with different spirits or water and consumed as a beverage. So this is typically what those kinds of beverages will be served in, this shrub glass. It's also what a Syllabub would have been finished and served in as well. So we've got one of these here today. And what we're going to do is take our whipped Syllabub mixture, and we're going to spoon it very carefully into our shrub glass. Try very, very hard to not drip it everywhere or to lose a single ounce, because trust me, you're going to want every single drop of this. So you're going to want to go just about to the top of your glass. Now, not everyone is going to have a shrub glass, so if you don't have something like this at home, if you've got a parfait glass, a champagne flute, or even a taller wine glass, that will work just fine. So, once you've got, let's do it a little bit here, you can let that go to waste. So once you've filled your shrub glass with your mixture, you kind of want to give it a slight tap. You want to level it out and make sure that you kind of deflate any air bubbles or pockets that you've got in there. And I know it's going to be really hard, but you're going to have to apply some patience here, because this is actually going to need to sit overnight. In the 18th century, it would have sat in a cool, dry place. Again, the miracles of modern technology, we can use our refrigerators at home for storing this. So you want to put this in the refrigerator and let it sit overnight. When you do that, something very interesting happens. The alcohol will begin to separate from the cream portion. Now, I made this earlier. I didn't have quite enough time to let it fully separate. As you can see here, the process has definitely begun. So I've got my alcohol here at the bottom with this sweet and creamy lemony fluff here above. And so if you would have given it the full time to fully separate, you're going to be left with about half alcohol and half cream. It'll come about midway up your glass. So at this stage of the game, all that's left is to enjoy your creation. And I really hope you do. So, and this is why it was really considered to be a dessert, because it would be eaten with a spoon. So it's kind of dessert on top, libation on bottom, and so I don't see how there could be anything wrong with that. Yes, and it's definitely as good as I thought it was going to be. So light and refreshing. The lemon flavor really comes through. The alcohol's not overpowering, but you definitely get a nice flavor from it. So I really hope that you decide to make this recipe at home and that you enjoy it as much as I do. So I just wanted to close by thanking you so much for joining us on this virtual Sip and Sup. I'm really glad that you can make it. If you have any questions about anything that you've seen today, please be sure to leave them in the comment section, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as possible. Be well and stay safe.